Hello and welcome to our little examination of the tabs that run across the top of Excel. In our last tutorial, we talked about the File and Home tabs. I'm going to take a little jump here and jump over to the tab here that says Insert. Insert, as you can imagine, allows us to insert different elements into our Excel worksheet. First of all, we've got pivot tables, and we'll be handling that in a totally separate tutorial, but just so you know, pivot tables are these wonderful data crunchers, so they can take a whole bunch of information from a variety of records in a database and really summarize the data quite nicely and quickly and quite clearly. So they're pretty nifty things, and as I said, they'll be appearing a little bit later in this course. We can also add illustrations, again, things like clip art or graphics from the internet, those sorts of things, or even illustrations that you may have on your own computer. Add-ins and my add-ins include things like if you go to the Microsoft Store, again, items that are usually third-party items that you can add into your Excel to make it do other things. I think you'll find, however, that Excel is a pretty robust program, and honestly, it'll cover most everything that you need to do with it. This area here, or this chunk, is probably the most common thing that we'll use right off the bat when we're working with Excel. So the charts area is a really quick and easy way to make charts based on your data. And what's nice is in the latest versions of Excel, and by that I mean the last couple versions of it, Excel includes recommended charts. So that if you don't know how to display your data, Excel will make suggestions for you, and very often they're pretty bang on the money. In here as well, under charts, there are ways that you can map your data on actual global maps, and this is also where we can come in and make a pivot chart based on pivot table data. 3D maps are actually kind of cool as well. Sparklines are nifty little mini charts, either bar charts or line charts, that don't so much appear as a separate chart on the page, they actually appear within a cell. So you can run Sparklines beside a table of data and kind of get an instantaneous view of what's happening with that data. We'll also take a look a little bit later at things called slicers, and slicers are kind of a user-friendly way to add filtering buttons to large tables of data. Link, of course, you can always add links into your Excel worksheet, and that can be really handy if you're using Excel as a database, because let's say you're doing a chart that includes, or I should say a table that includes, say, links to other documentation. Let's say workplace hazardous material sheets. You can actually have a table in Excel with links built into it, so if the person wants to see a specific sheet or document, they simply click on it and the document will pop up for them. Comments are very handy too if you're kind of placing things up for feedback. You can either include comments in cells so they remain hidden and only pop up when you roll your pointer over them. And they're also a way that, for instance, if people are helping you edit things, rather than making edits for you, they can pop in a comment, you can read it and decide whether or not you want to make changes based on that comment. There are ways to drop in different types of text as well, and a very large, robust collection of symbols that you can drop in. For most of the stuff we'll be doing in our courses here, you usually won't be using the symbols button very often. And Power View is a way, once again, of analyzing, interpreting, and displaying large amounts of business data. Our Page Layout tab is exactly what it sounds like. Themes is a way to very quickly kind of decorate or change the look of tables that you may have formatted as a table using the Excel Format as Table command. I know, kind of confusing, but it's just a very quick way to make your data and your tables look good, or change them from their present look to something you prefer better. What you'll use more often, however, is the page setup area. And again, you can use this to change margin settings or change the orientation of your page from landscape to portrait. As well, you can also set what's called a print area, so only a specific section of your worksheet prints. You can even throw in page breaks if you need to break up data to print it on separate pages. You can also throw your logo into the background, and print titles is used when you do have to break up data, but you want to keep the titles running along the top of every page of data, or the labels running along the left-hand side of every page of data that gets printed out. Scaled fit is used most commonly to squeeze a worksheet onto a single page, but keep in mind if you use this option, Excel will just do what you tell it to do, so you can actually shrink down a page so it's almost impossible to read it. So you got to use your judgment when doing these things. Your sheet options, you'll notice that grid lines and headings are now viewable. If I take the check marks away, you'll notice that you can take these elements off the page. And sometimes people will do things like take away the grid lines, so an Excel invoice, for instance, will look a little bit more like a Word document. Again, it's a preference thing. And arrange, you're going to use that most often if you're including groups of graphics on a sheet or things of that nature. In our tutorials, we won't work with that very much. Formulas. The Formulas tab is really the powerhouse of Excel. This is where I can go in and put formulas and functions into my worksheet and actually get those things to do the work, do the calculations required in the worksheet. And we'll have plenty of opportunity to play around with this area. And there's also a section in here called Defined Names. This is a place where you can actually name cells and use the cell names as part of a formula or function. It can be a really handy way of making user-friendly formulae and function that other people using your worksheet, it may allow them to understand what you're doing a little bit better. Formula auditing is where I will come along to check, kind of trace what might be causing a mistake on my worksheet. I can also use it to show all the formulae or functions on a worksheet using the Show Formulas command. It's a pretty nifty little button. A watch window is a way I can create a window which will constantly and consistently show me a group of data, even though I may be scrolling up and down the sheet. Calculation options, again, as it says, choose to calculate formulas automatically or manually. In our case, we'll be using formula and function to calculate things automatically. Right beside formulas is our data tab. And the data tab, once again, a real powerhouse. A lot of times we use Excel to work with numbers, but a lot of organizations also use things like Excel to keep address lists and create databases within it to manage clients and do all sorts of nifty stuff. You can also use Excel, you can connect it to another database program like Access or even Oracle, and you can pull data in from there or from web pages, and you can pull it into an Excel worksheet in order to analyze it. And sometimes people find the data analysis a little easier to do in Excel. By the way, if you heard a meow in the background, that's my cat. Chances are you're going to hear more of that in this tutorial. In addition, the Data tab is also where we can sort and filter our information as well, and we'll be doing that in subsequent tutorials. The Data Tools area is a very useful section where we go and we can do things like clean up our data. So if people, for instance, have put the first and last name into a column, text columns will break that up, and it's always way easier to have first and last name in separate columns when I'm working with data. There's also tools in here for us to get rid of duplicate records, and as well there's ways to do things like build data relationships. Now this sort of stuff is a way of linking various tables together so you can ask questions of a collection of tables. This appears in the PC version of Excel, but in Mac, the relationship button is often not there. So that may have changed with recent updates. I don't know, but when I last worked on a Mac, these sorts of features were not quite available. But stuff like text to columns and data validation rules, all those sorts of things are available, and we'll be playing around especially with data validation rules when we get into the data sections of this course. What if analysis is a variety of tools that allow us to kind of forecast what might be going on based on data that we have now. And we'll be doing separate tutorials on that stuff as well. A forecast sheet can also be employed to see what might be coming down the road in the future. Outlines such as group, ungroup, and subtotaling are just really quick ways for us to, again, compress a lot of data on a worksheet to make it easier to look at. And subtotals, as the name suggests, puts in kind of breakpoints in our data, subtotaling it based on what we tell it to do. And solver is this beast that, again, will take data that we already have, and it can help us kind of figure out maybe, let's say for instance, the maximum number of products we have to make within a given time to make maximum revenue based on a series of parameters. Solver's a pretty heavy-duty sort of tool to make use of. The Review tab. The Review tab is what it sounds like. I've got a spell checker in here and a thesaurus. I can add comments from this area as well. But a lot of times when I come in here to the review area, I'm coming in here to set protection on my worksheets and my workbooks, and usually assigning passwords to them and dictating who can edit the workbook. View is what it sounds like. Right now we're in normal view, but I can go into a page break preview if I wish, or better yet, I can go into page layout, and page layout will show me kind of the breakpoints on an 8.5 by 11 sheet. It lets me know what's going to spill over to another sheet, and if I need to change the layout for any reason. 9 times out of 10, though, we work with our data in the normal view. Once again, we have options to turn off or hide certain features within Excel. Our zoom features are here as well. If you're like me and your eyesight is not very good, you can either use zooming up here, or you can use this little slider down in the lower right corner to zoom in as well. Window is most useful for the freeze panes command, and that's a way that I can freeze titles or labels on the sheet but still allow data to move beneath it. It's really useful if I have a very large table of data and I can't see my headings or my labels when I'm looking at another section of the worksheet. Macros are little automated programs that I can write for Excel that will take a series of repetitive tasks and boil them down to a button click. Developer is something you may or may not have up, but this is kind of the area where I go to do the work with Excel that's a little more programmatical in nature. So again, recording a macro or editing the code within it, or adding buttons to my Excel sheet to do certain tasks. Add-ins, again, are just third-party items I can add into Excel to make it do more things. Help is what it sounds like. It's where I go if I'm having trouble with Excel and need to figure out how to do something. By the way, most times I just head off to Google like most people do. You may not have Acrobat, but I have Acrobat on my computer, so it kind of added in a component on the ribbon. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. And then there's also a search box up here at the top. I'm going to click the home button, and that concludes our little review of the ribbon. Next up, let's start building something.